How about the topic of 1 ounce of real courage, which none of you have? What you have is the ability to talk about courage and to wish you had it, and most of all, to wonder what on earth it is. Right? Yes. You don't know what courage is. How can you know it when you've never had it? And your ideas of courage are taken from history books about how that brave soldier stood his ground when all the other soldiers ran away, or about how that poor widow endured her husband's grief. Did she have any choice? That's not courage. Courage can only come into being when you have a choice. And maybe you understand that people who are living in the darkness and the depths of their own mind have no choice at all. What you're trying to do in this class is to gain a position where you can say yes to something and say no to something else. You're not at this point yet. Do you know that you come to these meetings mechanically? Do you know that? All right, the redeeming feature is that a small part of you is drawn here, but you're not quite sure why. And you hope to see right, I must see fresh. To see right, I must see fresh. Already that means that your ordinary thinking cannot see fresh. It can't see things rightly. It always distorts things according to what it has always seen and according to what it wants to get out of a situation. Therefore, it's a slave to any situation because it's depending on that situation to confirm the familiar. All right, write down the following sentence, please. When I can predict my resulting feelings, half the battle is won. When I can predict my resulting feelings, half the battle is won. Have you ever noticed how you're presently unable to foretell how you're going to feel from a situation? And this is a very complex matter because there is a certain part of you that does sense danger, but it's sensing danger to the ego. If we can begin to predict our resulting feelings from any situation, we can begin to win the inner battle. And I'm going to give you an experiment right now. Now, this is very important what's going to happen now. So you be, all of you, without exception, I want you to be very alert to what's going to go on here now. Now, I'm going to talk to every one of you in this room. And remember now, no exceptions. I don't care who you are, whether you've come here for a long time or this is your first night. Listen to what I'm going to say. I know you quite thoroughly, and I know that you are pure trash. I know you're pure trash. You are. You're trash. I'm not insulting you. I'm stating a fact. There's nothing good about you at all. Not your phony smiles, not your giving gifts to people. So you've been married for 30, 40 years and had all those anniversaries? You're trash. You're no good at all. There's nothing good about you. All right. Now, how did you react to that? Were you able to predict how you would feel as a result of me saying that? Maybe I should tell you, by the way, that what I said was not just for the purpose of an experiment. I'm giving you a fact. I know it's a fact. You don't know it. You don't know that you're trash. I do. You're worthless presently. You've got all these hatreds in you, all these smart aleck remarks in you, all these cheap, low-down, vile thoughts and moods and attitudes in you. Did even one of you notice your reaction to what I said? That's all right. You can raise your hand, and then that'll be enough of that. I just want to pass it over rather fast. How many of you, just raise your hand quickly and put it down, please, did not notice your state? How many of you are liars as well? How many of you are easily insulted? Get your feelings hurt very easily? Well, then, didn't you feel insulted when I said you were worthless? Perhaps some of you began to take it rightly because you're beginning to work on yourself. We're going to talk tonight about a subject that connects very much with the experiment that we just had, which is the subject of inner states. And I want to tell you from the very start, and you won't hear what I'm going to say, but I want you to understand that you won't hear what I'm going to say so that eventually you can hear. You won't hear what I'm going to say next. You are nothing but states. Your whole life in reality is nothing but states. And for the purpose of logic, of clarification, we will say that your life presently consists of natural states and unnatural states. It is dominated, as you well know, by unnatural states. When you're panicky, when you're afraid, when you're sarcastic, these are unnatural states. When you're compulsive, when you can't shut up, when you blab all the time, that's an unnatural state. When you can't stop your mind from driving you nuts, that's an unnatural state. When you're afraid of what's going to happen to you tomorrow or 10 years from now, that's an unnatural state. When you're ashamed of what you are, that is an unnatural state. When you're ashamed of what you did years ago, that's an unnatural state. When you have all this suppressed hostility in you, when you're frustrated and angry toward sex, toward romance, that's an unnatural state. When you feel that the world owes you a living, that's unnatural. When you behave rudely toward other people, that's unnatural. These are not you. None of these states are you, but you don't know that yet. All right, natural states. Think of what they are as some examples, and maybe someday we can work up to them. Wouldn't it be a nice, marvelous, desirable natural state to not be panicky when that whole room of people is excited and nervous over something? Wouldn't it be nice if you could just sit back on the couch where they're all blabbing, everyone trying to outshout the other, and you're sitting back quietly, understanding the whole situation, without being caught up in it, without being carried off, but sitting back there in command of yourself, because there's nothing unnatural in you being agitated. And you understand, of course, that they're not going to notice it. And you don't want them or don't care whether they do or not. You're quite sufficient living in the happiness of your own quiet, natural state. They're not going to notice it. They're too busy being noisy to notice quietness. Noisiness never can notice quietness. It's foreign to it, of course. So we consist, you and me, all of us in this room, every human being on earth is made up of a combination, a collection of hundreds and hundreds of different states. 99 and 9/10 of them unnatural, unhealthy, harmful. The beginning of understanding this is the beginning of seeing how you can begin to put an end to the unnatural states that are nagging you, and as they disappear, then we've made room for what we really are, for what's left over, what's natural there. Now, the chief reason we remain in these unnatural, damaging, unconscious states is because we are unconscious of them. But to begin to be able to predict how you're going to behave in a certain situation, and I'll get a specific example, to begin to be able to predict how you're going to feel, react in a certain situation, is the beginning of putting an end to an unnatural state. Because then, this is very complex, so follow, because then you can begin in a very small way to defy the pre-fear that you have in a certain situation, and then instead of playing it safe, you deliberately go into the situation knowing you're going to be scared, but you do it anyway. Knowing you're going to be criticized, but you do it anyway. Which begins to make conscious to you, begins to help you predict how you're going to react in a certain situation, and then say, I don't care how afraid it makes me, how I'm criticized, how I lose my images of being good, kind. I don't care about that. I'm going to have an ounce of courage to do what I have to do because I'm compelled to do it anyway, and I'm going to do it without images, flattering images, interfering, in order to experience the jolt of seeing my actual unnatural state for the first time. Follow? I'll tell you, I'm working hard. You work hard with me. If I can begin to not say I am that evil person, if I can begin to say I am not this or that person in a situation, I'm beginning to pull thought, label, identification, self, old nature, me, tradition, pain out of the event. by experiencing fully the result of my behavior, my mechanical, unnatural behavior, by experiencing it fully without trying to twist it, without trying to justify the behavior, without saying, I didn't mean to do that, which is a lie. You do everything you do, and you meant to do it, although you didn't mean to do it at the same time, because it happened, it was done by something in you, a state in you. By experiencing a state fully and bringing into it the insight that it is a state, not me, I begin to set myself free of labeling, of calling myself these states, and therefore set myself free of all the pain that goes with unnatural states. That is, all unnatural states are those which I have put a description on. I am bad, I am good. Real fast, another thought. When you're sitting quietly on the couch, sitting back, and all your relatives are panicky about the news event and how it's going to affect their income, how it's going to affect their life, affect their pocketbook, so when you're sitting back there really calm because you have worked on yourself, you do understand, do you not, that you are not ever saying, I am sitting here calmly while the rest of the people are panicky. If you go home and tell your wife that, then you are lying, and you're no different than the panicky people. You're playing your role of a non-panicky person in a panicky room. As we begin to see that unnatural states arise out of the intellect, in order for me to say something about myself, if I can experience the shock, even when I go home and say to my wife, everyone in that room was running around and anxious and nervous over that news report, you know what I did? I sat on that couch, very calm. See, he's read a book. He's been reading a book for 6 months, and he thinks he's got it. See, I sat on that couch, and I was very calm. He is calling himself a positive, natural state, which means that he's unnatural. Why did he have to brag about it? If he was really in that state, he would be sitting on that couch, indeed, very, very carefully and clearly, watching everybody nervous and afraid and yelling and arguing and fighting. But he wasn't thinking anything about it. Therefore, he was in a nonverbal, non-intellectual, natural state of freedom, right? Now, what's that person who's yelling and screaming, who doesn't know about you sitting in real liberty on the couch? What's he going to do? For one thing, Gene, one thing out of 100 he can do, in his observation of himself, assuming he even can do that, he can see himself going like that, and he can see himself dominating the conversation. He can begin to see how even his natural energy of physical movement, of talking, of mind, that natural energy has been stolen by 100 different states, and therefore is being wasted. Absolutely nothing is happening but a waste of natural energy. If he could go on from there, he could begin to see how while he was yelling gesturing, saying what he thought was intellectual things. While he was doing that, if his watchfulness of himself could go deeper, so that he could see that he was saying, I am this state, I am this state, that would begin to break it and begin to turn the energy in another direction. But he doesn't know, and you don't know how you are being stolen away. I'll give you an example of it. When I called you trash, which is a fact, and you had any kind of a reaction to it, you wasted your energy. You went into a wrong reaction because, astonishingly, you believe in yourself as trash. When I call you trash, it's quite a different thing from when you call yourself worthless. I call you worthless, which is a fact, because I see that you are calling yourself worthless in order to be a worthless state. Unnatural, negative state, because this is all you own. Therefore, you're going to protect it. Even denying it, of course, is protecting it. And even, get this, even being insulted is a very valuable thing to us, isn't it? Because it enables me to identify with my state. Don't you talk to me that way. And what do you mean I'm trash? Well, you're trash too, or whatever your reaction might be. This, by the way, is very, very common, isn't it? You too. That you know what that does, by the way? That produces the opposite, what confirms me. If you are trash, I am trash too. You're not the only trash in this room. Do you get it? Very complex. All right, we have a long, long ways to go yet. We've barely touched it. If I have been living, and you have been living, in unnatural states up to this point of our life, which we have, then our only hope, our only chance is begin to understand quite thoroughly everything that we've talked about tonight. So that we can begin, I'll simplify it now, to begin to get rid of unnatural states so that there is a non-thinking being left there. We just have to think about anything at all except on the practical level. But this means the end of everything that's been very falsely valuable to me. And it means I'm going to have to see something that my mind can't possibly understand. How's that for something? You are going to have to understand something that your mind can't possibly understand. How do you do that? How you do that is as follows. You come to an end to the intellect which is trying to understand it, which can never really understand it because it is made up of the naming process, of the descriptive process, and can't do anything but that. When you see that and let that go, let go of a false energy that's always trying to put into naming and labeling. When that energy is then directed into something higher, then you see that there is an understanding of what we're talking about tonight, which is non-intellectual. An understanding in which you can then use the word I, self, me, 1,000 times a day if necessary, because you know it means nothing. Because you have understood what self-reference means. So that when you say I, you know that it's just a word and no I there at all, which is the natural state, the free state, the pleasant state, which there's nothing to fight. How do you like being told that you're nothing at all, but simply a series of ever-changing negative states. Even your so-called good features are negative features calling themselves good features. Oh, but surely I have a few good points. You want to tell me what they are? And I'll tell you that you're lying. You don't even have a good point that brings you to these meetings. You don't come to these meetings. And you don't stay away, by the way. What comes to the meetings? Something that is not you. If you come to these meetings and you have 50 yous, you're not going to last long here. You're going to go out and quit or start your own dumb group or something. Then what comes here? What keeps coming here? Something that is not you. Something that is a natural state. Don't call it good, because you'll always connect it with you. In other words, the only goodness is the goodness with a capital G, which is God, which is truth, which is reality. Have you ever caught yourself bragging about your goodness? How generous you were? How thoughtful you are? Why do you join the PTA? Why do you join the cake-selling deal down at the church or school or organization? I'll tell you why. And how pathetic that you or me or anyone else thinks that you can buy a ticket to heaven. All the good deeds that I have ever done, that you have ever done, that any human being has ever done, are trash. They're vanity, they're sickness, they're lies. Oh, I'm telling you, all the goodness that I have done, that you have done, that the entire world, anyone who ever lived has done, is pure trash. Why? Because there's a so-called good person in back of it, and the reason this good person did it was to get the false feeling of life that I exist as a fairly decent, not perfect, you understand, but a fairly decent human being. And then you get all these props. You get your religious books and your church going, or just your smiling. I don't know where I've seen more hypocrites on the faces of people than when they look at a small child, when they know other people are watching. This is our idea of what it means to be a good person. And that means that you are loaded with hatred. It means that your states are devouring demons. And guess what devouring demons do for a living? They devour you, and they devour everyone else they meet. You're very, very cruel, you people in this room. You devour everyone you meet because you have no choice. You give them what you actually are. Don't you see that you're not good at all? Can't you see how tricky you are? All right. Now what you're going to have to do is to stop taking so much pride in being good and bad. Your pride in being good or bad are both unnatural states which have taken you over and which you live from and by and for. Having seen through everything we've talked about tonight, being willing to give yourself up, both your good self and your bad self, then the natural self has a chance to begin to grow at the expense of all the phoniness and all the lies and all the hardness and all the darkness. Then these demons, not being able to feed off of you, will leave you. And happy day, as they begin to leave you, they will also, of course, have to leave off tormenting you. Do you know that I know that all of you in this room are tormented human beings? Every single one of you. There's no exceptions to any of you. I know that you are tormented by this or that, one way or another. And you know it too, don't you? With what we've talked about tonight, the awesome truth finally emerges. The truth being that now, let me start a little further back. The truth being that in the past and now and in the future, we are not individuals at all. For practical purposes, we have names and that kind of individuality, or you're an engineer or a housewife. You have that kind of individuality, which is okay for the social level. You will finally see that in reality and in eternity, that you have no individuality at all. At first, before we understand these things and got tired of being tormented, we were a bundle of unnatural states. Having got tired of that and worked hard and come to every meeting and so on, having worked hard on ourselves, we begin not to become another me, not to become a good self, because we've seen through that trick. It took us years just to see through that phony trick, because the mind is very tricky. But I become another state without a name, another state without an individuality, which is natural and which is eternal. I have no eternity at all. Hatred comes and goes. Therefore, it has no eternity at all. It lives in time. Vanity has no future at all, no real future, only as long as the ego exists, as the present conditioned mind exists. So when we get rid of all the unnatural states, we have a natural state which is not me, which is eternity, and which you don't think about and don't have to think about. If you think about eternity, then you're not in it. You may give long lectures and write books about eternity and about being born again, but you're not in it because thinking can't enter the timeless state. So please consider this in summary. I am not an individual at all, regardless of how it seems, of how it appears. As long as I think I'm an individual, I'm going to have all kind of problems. I'm going to have all these problems. Compulsions, alcoholism, fear, being dominated by other people and trying to dominate other people. I'm going to have all these problems as long as I am under the false assumption that I'm an individual. When I see what God wants me to see, what reality wants me to see, that I am a state, a conscious state, then all my problems and all my compulsions disappear. And this is why we're here in this room, to achieve this state, which we can do. We'll have questions and comments on this after the break, which we'll now take. The worst punishment any human being can ever have is to remain the person he or she is. There is no worse punishment than that. That is the whole punishment, for you or I to remain what we presently are. But of course, if you suffer a lot, how nice, you're a martyr. Someone has treated you so badly. No wonder you suffer. See, now you've got something to brag about. Brag about the fact that other people are always hurting you. Even God hasn't treated you the way you so richly deserve. How many of you here, you can raise your hands now, then we'll have open discussion. How many of you here hate yourself? There's good reason for it, isn't there? Of course there's good reason for it. Now, I'm going to tell you something. You don't know what just happened 3 seconds ago. You don't know because you're so asleep. You're not awake to what's happening. Now, I asked that as a legitimate question, and your answer at a certain level was fine. I asked you, how many of you hate yourself? And you walked right into the trap. You're hating a state. Who is hating the state? Another state is hating the other state. What are you talking about? You hate yourself. You walked right into it as you continue to do all the time. If you had understood everything we've talked about, you wouldn't have walked right into it and said, yes, I hate myself. Because instead of reacting with thought, instead of you reacting with the intellect, you would have been above the question. Therefore, there would have been no reaction. You are on for questions, comments. Keep your questions short and to the point, please. What would you like to talk about? Phyllis.
Just a comment. Last week you told us to count to 3 before we answered. And everybody kind of went up right away instead of counting to 3. And it might have made a difference.
Yes, if they'd slowed down, yes. See how every teaching, every lesson is connected with another one in somewhere or other? For example, if self-reference, which we've talked about, had not been there, you wouldn't have walked right into it. And if you're over on the edge or back there, wave frantically so I can see you, please. Dottie is frantic, yes.
Can you ever be in one of these negative states without having a thought that puts you there?
No, the thought and the state are one thing. Remember that. Just remember what we said about thought. It's either practical or sick. Practical or impractical. All I thought is impractical. All I thought is painful. Painful. Look, can you imagine this? Let's get a situation. You're running for public office, right? You campaign and you spend a lot of money and you're on television. And the election comes and you win the election. You win the election. You're now the senator from so-and-so state. There's the victory dinner, right? And you get up there and you start thanking everybody. And boy, I tell you, have you ever been happier in your life? Have you ever been, after all this hard work, you were nobody, your parents were poor, and you put yourself through school, and now you are the honorable senator from so-and-so. Think of the salary alone. I mean, don't mention that because you're not supposed to be thinking about that. You're here to serve the people, right? But secretly, think of the salary. What is it? $45,000 a year, $50,000, $60,000 a year salary. That's just the beginning. All the free trips, the junkets, all the things you can pull, everything. Great. Pension, all that. Free hospital. That man is standing up there. 6 years, he's safe, right? 6 years Senate. Always running for the Senate, not for the House. You're safe for 6 years. 2 years in the House. His big moment of glory. I'll tell you. Now look, he's smiling, or she is, smiling happily. Everybody's applauding, and he's feeling very affirmed. Now, I'm going to tell you, now try to do this, please. It's very important for you to do this. I want you to understand that man in his moment of greatest glory and happiness is suffering intensely. Right at that moment on that platform with millions of human beings looking and applauding him. Can you remember that now and go to work on that? Go ahead, Jim.
Okay. Get back to this. When you said that, when I can predict my resulting feeling, half the battle is won. Now, in a situation there, the person can predict, okay, that he's going to feel elated, but that is not his true feeling. And is this why I must put myself in a position of embarrassment consciously, so because I know that is what I'm going to be? And is that the only time when I can predict my feeling to this state now, is when I put myself into an uncomfortable situation rather than a so-called one of elation? Is that clear? No?
No, I understand. I'm trying to, this is very complex. All right, if I pick up the hot potato and it burns my hand, do I pick up the hot potato the next time with my bare hand? Only if I'm stupid and can't learn a lesson, right? Now, look, let's probe this a little bit. How many of you felt pained 10 years ago to the day, 10 years today? How many of you felt pained the same day, Friday, 9 years ago? Pained. Raise your hand, everyone. He said dictatorially. 8 years ago, how many of you were in pain? 7, 6. You might as well just keep them up at the same time. Are we a room full of stupid people or not? And I was kind. I just went back 10 years. I could have gone back 20, right? We don't learn the lesson of pain, and there's a number of reasons for that. We don't want to predict the pain because we're getting this false pleasure out of it, the eye pleasure out of the pain. You have to begin to see that pain is doing nothing but destroying you, and I can't express this in words. You have to see it for yourself, so that you can get to the point where you finally, for the first time in your life, in a small way, at home, with someone you live with, in a small way, you're about to make a sarcastic remark to that person. I don't care what he or she did. You are about to make a sarcastic, which is a disguised cruel remark, right? At the split second you're about to say that, you begin to predict, because you're able to think rightly at the moment, catch yourself, you begin to predict what that sarcasm is going to do to you. And what it's going to do is all sorts of bad things.
Yeah.
It's going to steal you away from you. It's going to cause you to have a bad relationship with that other person, which means that you're not moral at all. You don't care whether you hurt that wife or boyfriend or whatever it is, because you're still getting a false feeling of life, a false I, out of being sarcastic. Notice how nothing is sweeter, quote marks, than catching someone else in a mistake. We never catch ourselves because we're perfect, right? But the other person makes one little mistake and we pounce on it. Why? Because we haven't learned the lesson. We can't predict the self-defeating result of, look, just a little sarcasm. We're not talking about a big thing. That little tiny remark. You catch yourself, and when you see what it does to you, you won't do it anymore.
This Vernon Howard tape will be continued now here on Side 2.
See, we really don't see the pain in what we so-call enjoyment.
I'm told you that man, he's in heaven, isn't he? Millions of people applauding him. He's in heaven. That man, heaven help you if you ever get rich and famous. You'll never be able to break the state. Or if you get poor and nobody, you can identify with either state. Because you'll never, most people do not break through that. Because the pleasure pain has now become so hardened that they can't live without it. The pleasure pain. Now, to the degree that this new senator identifies with the marvelous pleasure, to that degree he will be the victim of eventual pain. He's not going to be senator all his life, is he? Isn't he going to be defeated or kicked out of office or just retire for some reason or other? Who's he going to be after? Who's he going to be? Well, I've been asked to be on television even as a guest for 3 years. He's saying to his wife over the dinner table. 3 years. Nobody's asked me to be out of office. Only one thing is going to do it for us. And I'll put it this way, and you will understand somewhat. If you don't, ask a question. I'll repeat the warning. Don't twist this now. And don't think you understand it, because you don't. And this warning is very important. You're going to have to become a far greater sinner than you now are. Now, in your present state, you are a combination of saint and sinner. So you think. You think you're a good person and a bad person, right?
Right.
Yeah, not bad. Or I get mad once in a while, All right. You're going to have to become a complete sinner. That is, you're going to have to go so deep into your sin, which is shocking. Your moral standards are going to be shattered. But you have to keep going deeper, 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 deeper into your own sin, to the point where the suffering, the shame gets so horrible that something cracks. And what cracks, finally, if you can begin to comprehend this, what finally cracks and begins to dissolve is your belief in yourself being a horrible sinner. Now, worked for 10 years. You have to go through the whole pit of sin in order to go beyond it, so that you're neither a sinner nor a saint. Boy, and I'll tell you what will happen to you among other things. I'll tell you one of the devouring demons that will attack you. You'll recognize it if you go this far, and it's already operating in a small way. It's the devouring demon of accusation. And if you listen to it, it will keep you a moral person. It will keep you a Christian, or a Sufi, or a Zen Buddhist. Therefore, it will keep you an actual sinner. Because if you're a saint, you're also a sinner. What you have to do is defy the accusations that say you're a horrible person, and don't listen to them, because if you listen to them, You'll believe them and get death out of believing that you're a horrible sinner. If you go far enough into your sin, if you go far enough into it, you'll begin to understand its nature and put an end to it. This is the basis of, I'm pointing at you so you listen, because I know you know this, Leland. This is the basis of that saying, if a fool persists in his folly, he will become wise. The reason a fool doesn't become wise is because he doesn't become foolish enough. He keeps remnants of wisdom with him, quote mark wisdom, of intelligence with him. If any of us here in this room will have the courage to get to the point where we're complete fools, where we know nothing at all, where we're going, we don't know what we're doing here on earth. If we would go deeply into this pit, which you can call sin, foolishness, stupidity, confusion, and stay there, then the role of mechanical thought and feeling will exhaust itself briefly. And at that first brief exhaustion of the mechanical self, at the moment of its exhaustion, because it is quiet for 1/10 of 1 second, into that very brief silence comes something from way up here and comes down, and you will sit there and know it. This is the beginning of authentically being born again. The slowing down of the mechanical self leaves a 1/10 of a second for something to enter. Okay, you're on.
What is sorrow, and how do you view a suffering situation?
Sorrow, what's it all about? All suffering, all sorrow, basically is caused by being separated from who you actually are in reality. All sorrow, the sorrow is the prodigal son, because he's separated from where he really should be. Now, it's a very general description, but you start with that, and you'll see that any opposite you have to sorrow, which you may now call joy, is simply a temporary absence of the sorrow because you've been distracted from it. You get elected, you're just as sorrowful as you were before. You just don't know it because a false feeling of life has taken you over. Sorrow will be absent when I am absent.
She also asked Vernon, I think, how should one view a situation of suffering or sorrow?
View it?
Yes.
Well, simply something to get rid of.
I think she means in someone else, or a situation in the world where someone is suffering or in sorrow.
Well, first of all, look, okay, fine. You look out in the world and you see a suffering world. If you suffer as a result of seeing a suffering world, there's something wrong with you. Because you say, I should do or could do something about that suffering. Who's going to do something about it? You see how this important is to find out about states? A state in you wants to relieve the hungry people in China. I'll tell you, you're going to have to go a long ways to not make yourself suffer over the hungry people in China or wherever it is these days. I don't know, it changes so fast. Why do you identify with their suffering? Why do you increase their suffering by suffering yourself over it? You have no business letting the pain of the world pain you. If you do, you have contributed to it. You are part of it. If all of a sudden every human being on earth understood what I just said, there would be no more suffering. And there'd be no more hunger. Production would go into bread, not into machine guns. Find out sometime who's feeling sorry for this vicious, cruel, agonizing world. Are you afraid that you might someday become part of it? Where are you entering into that view of the suffering world? People who try to help suffering people are destroying those suffering people. Do you understand that at all? Zena, you look quizzical.
No, I'm trying to let it sink in.
Okay. Did I see a hand somewhere? Leland.
What is the real meaning then, Vernon, of the term compassion connected with what you've just been saying?
Compassion is pure understanding of life as it is. Which means you understand yourself as you are and no longer call yourself any state at all.
Does that mean also, Vernon, an understanding that there's nothing to be done?
That's correct. Why this frantic desire to help the world? Marvelous way to escape seeing what a devil you are. Therefore, a devil is trying to save the world. Has the United Nations stopped any wars? How many wars have we had since it was formed? How many revolutions? How many millions of people thrown into prison and starved since the United Nations was formed? Devils are trying to save devils, and they destroy each other. Devils dress in suits and ties, and sometimes in rags, depending on what is proper for the occasion. Yes, Tom.
Vernon, how rare is a class like this in the world?
Extremely rare. I have no statistics. I don't know what's happening in Bordeaux, France. I don't even know what's happening in Henderson. Yes, please. Raise your hand high. I can see it, fortunately. Go ahead, please.
If ultimately there's nothing to be done, what's to be done?
Work on yourself. All right, I'll give you this gentleman, and all of you start. Just a repetition, but watch how you can't do the simplest of thing. Every one of you in this room, except those of you who live 1,000 miles away, of course, you're all to come to every single class, and there's a good reason for it. You have to work or your vacation or whatever, a good reason for it. All right, let's see, how many we got? I don't know, 40 people maybe. So, every one of you are going to come to every class from now on, right? Not right. Because you can't hear what I just said, what I said at the beginning. It's essential for your soul's salvation. You want to get religious about it? We'll get religious. It's essential for your soul's salvation, for you not to lose another second Look at all you've lost already. Look at what you've lost. Don't you let anything keep you away from coming here. Move up here if you have to, after getting my permission. Because there are certain rules if you move here from a distance. I don't want liars moving up here and trying to use the class for their own sick benefits. Which can't be done anyway, by the way. Zena?
Does goodness with a capital G ever use the devil? Or can it? Do you know the question, what I'm trying to say? Does it?
All right, I'll answer your question in a different way, Zena. Light has no connection whatever with darkness. None. It doesn't talk to it. It doesn't bargain with it. It doesn't fight with it. The light has no connection whatever with darkness. Someday you'll see this so deep, and when you do, you'll know how to behave toward everyone you know perfectly. You'll be able to behave perfectly with them. Because your light has nothing to do with their darkness. See, if you have darkness, we'll take Zena for example. If you have darkness in you, Zena, that darkness will want something to do with the darkness in someone else, because there's trading or feeling superior or feeling inferior, whatever. That darkness will want something to do with other darknesses in other people. You know, even just blabbing with each other, which is a waste of time. As you begin to grow and your darkness disappears to be replaced by light, then that darkness doesn't request anything from the darkness out there, and that darkness, no longer being asked and no longer having a trading value, goes away from you too. This is why your friends depart. Or if they're in your life because they're relatives or something like that, they depart psychologically, if not physically. See?
Vernon, you said earlier in the meeting, why do you come in with your phony smiles? And then later you said, you know, with your sad faces and eyes. We can't do anything else but the way we could. Because anything we try to do is phony, right?
I'm trying to snap you out of your spell. You don't even know you're in a spell. How gently you were treated here. Because that's all you can take. We have 10 minutes or so. Yes, Larry.
I do not feel I would ever in life have known that I was talking in my sleep here one day until you asked me, do you know you were talking in your sleep? I don't think I would have ever known it until you pointed out, and it was close enough to me that I could see it.
All right, fine. Small jolts are essential. And there have been quite a few jolts in this room since the beginning of the meeting, correct? Huh? Some outward, as Phyllis case, some inward. Yeah. All this is health. All this is health. And we say this is what we want. Let's come and get more of it. So that you can begin to jolt yourself during the day. Yes, Chuck.
What's the best way to go against our pretense?
See it? You can't fight any, I'm using the word fight deliberately, of course. You can't fight anything unless you're conscious that you're being taken over by it, that it's got you. Try to find some, and we all have to work on this, try to find a little fault. What's a little one? Try to think. Let's get something. What would be a little fault? I'll try to think of an example. All right, interrupting people when they're talking. Okay? You know, a little one, not a big one. Give us some more little faults, please. Little tiny ones. Procrastination. You know you should do the dishes, but you're terrified by a sink full of dishes.
Excuses.
You find some little fault and be aware of it, then go against it. You have the great courage when you look at that sink full of dishes, take a deep breath and be a brave soldier and take that soap shaker and shake it in there and turn on the hot water and you get the dishes done. Pretty soon, I don't think you're going to agree with me, pretty soon doing dishes will be just as much fun as watching television. Because you are living at that moment. You are living at that moment. Go ahead, Joe.
I was just going to say excuses is another fault. Excuses. Excuses.
Making
fault.
Making excuses. Yeah. Defending ourselves. Linda, please.
If someone's continually coming to you for sympathy and you give it to them, then you are contributing to their insanity and the world's insanity.
Did you say?
What you're saying this evening?
Repeat that, please.
Well, someone comes to you for sympathy.
Yes.
And you give it to them, you're contributing to their insanity and the world's insanity.
Exactly.
The only thing you owe them is not to.
Give them your understanding, which you must have. Then you can talk to them properly, can you not? For example, you say, look, you have this problem. Of course, you're not going to be your friends anymore, you know. But you say, can you begin to connect the problem you have with your own lack of responsibility or something like that? You know, if they want a word of advice, which they probably don't. But I think you're getting at just telling them how badly they've been treated by life. Yes.
And if you've done this, if you've told them the truth, and that's nothing, then you just stop it.
You're destroying them, and you're also destroying yourself because you want them to like you, don't you? When you tell them, that brute of a husband of yours, I know how badly he treats you. You're falling right into their trap. Pretty soon they won't come around anymore because they'll be told that it's their fault for being in the trouble they're in. Our wrong state is the fault. That wrong state dragged me there, dragged you there. Can I see how I was dragged there? You know, in simple things. You drag yourself down to the bar. You drag yourself to that radical political group, wherever it is, and you get in a fist fight, or you get this or that. What dragged you to that stupid place in the first place? A wrong state. You thought it was going to reward you. And what it did was give you a stab, which you call a reward. People sometimes choose, let me rephrase it, sickies choose other sickies consciously, unconsciously, in order to have a fight. They know sooner or later that woman, she meets that man meets the woman. They know sooner or later they're going to have a fight. You know, a little fun first of all, you know, okay. Sooner or later. And it must happen. It absolutely must happen. Because a wolf must behave like a wolf, not like a lamb. Have you ever noticed yourself when you're meeting another person, either, you know, boyfriend, girlfriend, or anybody, notice how your behavior is so sweet at the start, then gradually as the benefits disappear or whatever, your real old mean nature finally comes out?
That's the moonlight and roses.
Yeah, the moonlight and roses disappear fast, don't they? Yeah. Do I hear a bitter soul in the Yeah, Jay.
It would be nice if we could learn that lesson when we're young, but we,
You're pretty young yet, Jay. You've got a chance. Larry.
It would be nice if we can learn that lesson when we're old.
Right. Do you know, I get good news for you, and this will end. Now, you have to see this. You can't think about it. You have to see it. Here, where you think, you have to learn to see, not think. When you get this, you'll always be in now. And while the physical body may be 40, 60, 80, you will be in now. Therefore, you will be in eternity. Therefore, all the problems, difficulties of being young, middle-aged, or old have no meaning to you. Because you are living right now, and not only that, but you understand that while you are yet in the physical body, that is also a now period, and so you live life fully now. Don't you know people who are practically gone at 40? They haven't discovered this secret. You can stay young all your life, and this isn't just a phrase to make you feel good. I'm telling you, you can be internally youthful, fresh, all your life, even when you're 90 years old. And there are one or two examples of this in true teachers, by the way. All right, good night.